Good evening and welcome to the October 17th session of the Johnston County Board of Commissioners. I'd like to welcome everyone and call this meeting to order. And as is customary, we open with the prayer and the pledge, and I've called on Commissioner Godwin to lead us in the prayer and Commissioner Stevens to lead us in the pledge. So if you would, please stand.
Let's pray. Father God, we're thankful for this time of year, Lord, when we have our harvest, and we're thankful for a blessed harvest, and we ask your blessing on all the farmers and all of us that depend on agriculture. We thank you for the blessings of being here in Johnston County. We ask your blessings on this meeting tonight. Lead us and guide us. Help us to make wise decisions that would be beneficial to all the citizens in Johnston County. Forgive us our shortcomings. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion on that, or do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I move the agenda be approved as presented.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda approval. We have, let me look at my letters here, we have 5 items on there. Approval of our minutes from our September 6th meeting, and we have some additions to the DOT system. We also have approval of a special warranty deed and appointments to the Elevation Firefighters Relief Fund Board, and we have a couple of budget revisions, one for the library and then one for social services. Those are adjustments to the expenditure line items. So any adjustments to the consent agenda? All right, I hear a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I just have during discussion just one quick question.
Okay.
For Chad, the COVID grants mentioned in the library here, anything else in the wings as far as you know? More COVID grants available, that type of thing?
There may be some intermittently, but no, nothing right now that we know of.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any other discussion? All right, we had a motion in a second, so all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Next up on the agenda is public comments. If there's anyone here from the public, please come forward, state your name and where you're from, general location, town or township. We have a very few rules, but one of them is you have 3 minutes. The other is that you be cordial and respectful, and the final one we had during campaign season is no campaigning. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Good evening, Johnston County Board of Commissioners. My name is Kendall Parker. I live on Taylorsville Road, 4 Oaks in the Ingrams Township. I've lived there my entire life. I spoke at the 10 a.m. meeting on March 7th, 2022 to ask for your help in resolving a non-compliant situation as it related to a shooting range located at 645 Taylorsville Road, 4 Oaks, owned by Mr. Dustin Norris and affiliated with Practical Defense Solutions on Main Street, 4 Oaks. The land plot for the shooting range is 2.86 acres down a small cart path with no legal easement or right-of-way to the property. This area is zoned for agriculture. I'm here today to bring you up to date on some of the activities that have transpired since March the 7th. On March 31st, Mr. Norris filed a Town of 4 Oaks application for voluntary annexation of this land plot containing the shooting range and indicated the reason for the application as town services. On May 9th, approximately 45 to 50 people in opposition to the annexation request attended the Town of 4 Oaks meeting to voice our concern. A petition was signed by 61 community members and landowners in the surrounding area of the shooting range opposing the annexation. During the meeting, it was announced that the request for annexation was withdrawn within approximately 2 hours before the Town Council meeting. On May 31st, Mr. Norris filed another application for voluntary annexation with the same reason of town services. These attempts at voluntary annexation appear to be attempts to bypass Johnston County regulations and instead fall under the jurisdiction of the Town of 4 Oaks. At the June 13th Town of Four Oaks Commissioners meeting, several community members attended and spoke against the annexation request. The board voted unanimously to not accept his application. Shooting continued sporadically through the summer and could be heard many weekdays and most weekends. A planned two-day pistol carbine workshop sponsored by Practical Defense Solutions took place on Saturday, October 1st through Sunday, October 2nd at the shooting range on 645 Teddersville Road. An online advertisement for this event indicated tickets could be purchased through the website for $400 each. On October 1st, Saturday, gunshots could be heard beginning around 8:30 a.m. and lasted until approximately 8:45 p.m. with loud, continuous, multiple guns being fired at the same time. It was visibly noted that multiple Four Oaks police cars, marked and unmarked, as well as police from other towns and other personal vehicles, were seen going into this cart path during Saturday, October 1st. On Sunday, October 2nd, shooting continued and several vehicles were seen at the property. It is my understanding a notice of citation was issued on October 6th. The community is asking for your help today to put an end to this continuous nuisance to our peaceful community and stop the disturbance. This is an example of what was heard this past Saturday. May I give you a copy of the online advertisement for the October 1st and 2nd event charging $400 per ticket?
Sure. If you would give that to the clerk, please.
Okay, thank you for your time and consideration. And there is another person that would like to also speak concerning this topic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you again would just state your name and town or township, and you have about 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sandy Parker. I am a resident and property owner on Teddersville Road, Four Oaks, in the Ingrams Township. I, too, oppose the outdoor shooting range located on Teddersville Road. Mr. Parker just mentioned 2 dates with related events that are very concerning to me, and I feel it is necessary to inform you here tonight that on Saturday, October 1st, I woke up to see paintballs scattered across my front porch and yard. Soon the day just got worse. My community was subjected to being double waylaid with sounds of extremely loud, repetitive gunfire all day and into the evening hours. From what I understand were 2 separate events being held at the range at the same time. One of the events extended into Sunday with all-day shooting as well. Next, Thursday, October the 6th, at about 10:30 p.m., my home was paintballed again. This just happened to be the same day papers were served on the landowner for violation against the county's planning and zoning ordinances. With this second paintball occurrence, I do not feel as if these instances were random. I feel personally targeted and threatened for my opposition. Obviously, in my opinion, this situation has definitely escalated. I have lived on Teddersville Road for 35 years, much longer than the range property consisting of only 2.86 acres has been under current ownership. The June 5th, 2021 opening of the range was announced on the Practical Defensive Solutions website. As you were made aware of last March, this community has been dealing with this issue for some time now. In this once peaceful neighborhood, there is now heightened alert, a growing sense of increased aggravation, and a dread as to what's next as this community continues to be manipulated. The property owner has twice requested voluntary annexation through the town of Four Oaks for town services, even though it's located outside of the ETJ. This action seems to be a deliberate tactic to work around the county's jurisdiction. The issues are far greater than what can be expressed in 3 minutes. There are many other safety, environmental, and health-related concerns that surround this shooting range.
To me, the extent and magnitude of what is occurring on this property is not only very obtrusive, but unhealthy and unwelcomed in our neighborhood, as recently as the all-day shooting that just occurred this past Saturday, October 15th. We are asking for action to protect the health, safety, and well-being of our community and restore the peacefulness which is now long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I forgot to state is we typically do not respond during the questions, but we will get in staff comments and updates. We will get an update from, but I know that with the enforcement you mentioned, and I think this board is not too thrilled that we have somebody in the community that continues to violate, I don't want to say request and enforcement action. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but we'll go with that. About operation, and it's continuing to happen. So we'll make sure that staff works diligently to make sure that all enforcement actions are taken. So anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? All right, Madam Clerk. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Come on up.
If you will.
Welcome back.
Just real quick, so you can kind of look. And I'm one short. I was fast getting out the door.
Well, this is smaller than.
Yeah, and I'm
before,
going to
so
get
you
that
got-
back.
Oh, you want it back?
I'm going to get it back, except for my number and my email, because I would love to sit and talk with
Me and
y'all.
you share.
I've got 3 binders, so if you want to see the big, I've got the 3 binders. I would love to just sit down and talk with y'all.
We'll start the clock now.
Jan,
So there you
okay.
go.
My name is Jan Whitley. I live on Brogdon Road in Smithfield, outside of Smithfield, and I'm talking about the Grabtown Road subdivision. It's coming back up for approval tomorrow night, and I just want to talk with y'all again and tell you how much we need your protection, and it is your jobs, because it's your promises, and it's y'all's promises, and y'all's campaign promises, and it's your promises to look after us. Anyway, Article 1 in the Chapter 14, or Article 1 says that, 14:1 says that Chapter 14 is the ordinance. And so anything that is in the ordinance should be required if it is with land development, So I'm saying they don't need to be allowed to pick and choose which sections in Chapter 14. I mean, if it relates to a minor subdivision, no, I understand that. On a major subdivision in this case, or any of the building, like the manual, whichever, if it's in Chapter 14, one of those sections versus the manual, then whichever is of equal or better is the one that is supposed to be followed. But anyway.
Ms. Whitley, when you say they, who's the
They, I'm
referring
talking
to?
about the developers.
Okay,
And I'm talking about I'm not talking about all developers, I'm talking about any developer that does a plan that is abusive. Okay. But for one thing, if you look at that first page, this is a very dangerous area. There is blind curves, and they have a subdivision road coming right on the other side of that blind curve, and it's a blind site on the other side of that road as well. So this here, there's 6 roads within less than a mile or about a mile that's going to be hitting Brogdon Road, and then right here, the first one shows there are 3 roads. And if you see a little red dot over here, that was a fatality. There's been 2 fatalities, not all that far. That one fatality is if the woods were cut, you could see it right from the subdivision that's being proposed. And the other one was a little bit farther down the road. So it's a very dangerous road because of curves and blind spots, and it's also deer and wild hogs and stuff like that. And then on these other pictures here, you will see, and I'm not a jealous person, but there's a little sting when you have developers that won't even contact you. Here is a thing where I have tried from May to July to get one of the developers to contact me, and he never would. Something happened to where there was some trespassing, and somebody called and ended up calling one of the other owners, and I found out that he was tied to it with the one that had to let the trespasser off. It was one of their employees, and so that gave me another name. So I ended up calling him, and he answered my phone. He probably didn't know who I was, the reason he answered, but he did, and he talked with me, and I offered, as far as the flag lot part, because there's a lot of issues, environmental flag lot, danger, and I offered to buy 50 feet up the path and 100 foot on around the house, or at least on the front and the side of the house, and pay them what they pay, a little bit more than what they paid. So, you know, I have tried. They told me that that was not a good fit for their land, but I did try, and if you look at this one here, this shows. It shows how close Brogdon Road is to the subdivision. There's also, like I said, a couple of fatalities right, you know, not far from one another. And it shows where there's water going to be running off from two branches out into another branch that runs into the Neuse River. And if you will look at soundriver.org, you will see where the river keeper happened to do her and two more river keepers happened to go on a canoeing 10-day canoe trip. And the very first place they stopped, she's standing in the branch that this runoff goes into, and she talks about it, and she sent the planning board some information to where there are still some concerns with what has been done. I've given you numbers about the and there, that shows too about that. I'll give you, and this here shows where a subdivision was denied, not in this is not Johnston, but in Greenville because of traffic safety and density concerns. And then this is a copy of a findings of fact that it was denied, and they did a little bit on stormwater, and they give 10 more foot around the house. But when you're talking about a house that you've got 25 foot in the front and the side, nothing up the path, that is pale in comparison to the violations, the privacy, the noise, the possibility of them going on the path. There's nothing, no buffer on the path, no.
Ms. Whitley, you
Okay, but anyway.
you've earned frequent visitor
Yeah,
mileage, so we
I know.
appreciate
Yeah,
you,
but anyway.
you bringing this to us. But is it my understanding
my
it's been
thing-
denied
what
twice?
my
Let me-
thing
Let me
is-
finish. And
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's been denied twice, and I know it goes again tomorrow night, but we appreciate you bringing this information to us. And I know as we're looking at our land use plan and updating our ordinances, that things that you're mentioning are things that we're considering. So I'll go ahead and finish.
Okay, I need your help now. And what I'm asking for is you to be sure that all ordinances, all sections of Chapter 14 are adhered to, not pick and choose, not be allowed to pick and choose. And I would love for somebody to allow me, to sit down and show everything I've got sometime. If you will email me or call me, I would love that. But I appreciate y'all's time.
Okay.
All of you.
Yeah, send me an email, and then we'll spend more than 3
Thank you,
minutes. And the other ones are down there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, don't see anybody else move. Madam Clerk, do we have any emails? All right, then we will move on to the next item on the agenda. We have our Register of Deeds, Mr. Craig Olive here to discuss a proclamation for Alzheimer's Disease Awareness and Caregivers Month. So, Mr. Olive, if you'd step forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the board. On behalf of the Senior Citizens Center here in Johnston County, I've come to you tonight to approve this proclamation of caregivers and Alzheimer's awareness. Excuse me, I got a sore throat real bad. So I will yield for want somebody to,
So I think Vice Chairman Harris is prepared to read the
I
proclamation.
appreciate
Save
that.
your voice. So,
Anything I can do to help the Register of Deeds.
And also, November the 10th, we're having a candlelight reflection. And I invite everybody and the public to come to join us. If you have a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, or you had one in the past that has gone on to be with the Lord, we want you to come, so we want to recognize you.
What
It's going to
time
be
and
at
place
6
for that?
o'clock in the atrium of the courthouse.
okay.
The reason why I am so pro about this, my mother died 15 years ago today. She was a victim of dementia, Alzheimer's, and unfortunately, my oldest sister is fighting that battle right now in Greensboro. She has a wonderful caregiver, which is her daughter. I also have another sister that is fighting in the early stages, and I have some more siblings that may be on their way. So, but maybe we share the same mother, but maybe I took my genes after my daddy. So, we invite y'all to come. Thank you.
Vice Chairman Harris.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'll read the following proclamation. Alzheimer's Disease Awareness and Caregivers Month. Whereas Alzheimer's disease is a progressive degenerative disease of the brain causing deterioration in memory and thinking as well as judgment and reasoning ability. It also affects behavior, emotions, and the ability to perform self-care. And whereas Alzheimer's disease is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States, killing more people than breast and prostate cancer combined. And whereas it is also the 6th leading cause of death in North Carolina and also right here in Johnston County. And whereas 1 in 3 senior citizens dies with Alzheimer's or another dementia and form than half of all the Americans know someone, or all Americans know someone who has or have had Alzheimer's. And whereas more than 6 million Americans are now living with Alzheimer's disease, and with over 180,000 residing in North Carolina. Whereas Alzheimer's disease affects whole families since it is a long-term illness that requires long-term care. And whereas over 11 million family members and friends are serving in their unpaid caregivers nationwide, 358,000 of those giving care in North Carolina. Whereas an estimated 15.3 billion hours of care valued at $257 billion will be provided to those with Alzheimer's and the other dementias in 2021. Whereas in 2021, Alzheimer's and other dementias will cost the nation $355 billion. That figure could be as high as $1.1 trillion by the year 2050. And whereas with early detection and diagnosis, individuals and families can gain access to treatment, medications, enroll in critical research trials, and fully participate in planning for their future. And whereas in the Johnston County Board of Commissioners recognizes individuals, families, friends, and caregivers dealing with this devastating effects of Alzheimer's disease, and the researchers and those that are seeking causes and cures, and the educational programs and support services provided by the Alzheimer's organizations. Now, therefore, the Johnston County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim November 2022 as Alzheimer's Disease Awareness and Caregivers Month in Johnston County, and urges our citizens to commend its observance. Proclaimed the 17th day of October 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the proclamation.
I second it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
We didn't vote.
Yeah, we will. I was going to see, well, before I ask for any other discussion, I want to,
I have
I don't
some
have nothing
discussion.
else.
all right.
I share a registrar's concern with it. My mother was sick with it for 6 years before passing away. Her mother, my grandmother, and my uncle and my aunt also had it. I'm not sure about my genes, but I worry about it, Craig, to tell you the truth. But this ceremony on November 10th. It's quite touching. I've attended several, and I would urge all the citizens to go out and support that. It's a beautiful ceremony.
I was a caregiver for 14 years for my mother. So I saw from the very beginning to the very end, and she was in the fetal position. And caregiving is a hard job.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if we didn't mention former Commissioner Ray Woodall, who suffered through the disease, a terrible disease. Sadly, we're all in the same family, Craig, but you know, he suffered, it was a long time that but he was a good man.
And I want to thank Neil Davis and his fine staff for putting the candlelight reflection on each year. And I just take a small part of it.
All right, any other discussion? So I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion and approving the proclamation, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Proclamation is approved.
Thank you,
Mr. Allen.
thank you, thank you, Board.
Yes, sir.
All right, next up, we have Denise Amato with DOT to present an easement request to the board. Ms. Amato, welcome.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'm Denise Amato. I'm with the Department of Transportation. And there is a bridge on NC 210 over Middle Creek that needs replacing in order to make it safe for the traveling public. On this, we are requesting 1 DUE, which is a permanent drainage utility easement of 0.23 acres, 2 permanent drainage easements, one of 0.19 acres and one of 0.005 acres, and 1 temporary construction easement, which is 0.072 acres. The temporary construction easement will end at the end of construction on all of this. The area in question has a pump station on it for the county, and our PDE and DUE are pulled back, so we do not actually touch the pump station. However, we are going to be replacing a force main, and my engineers have been working with your engineers so that the transition from the old to the new will be smooth and there will not be any break or service disruption on all of this. We are asking that you work in conjunction with us, that this be donated, that we do not pay you for the easements, and that we can get it signed. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Amato or of staff?
I have a question for council. You've talked with our utility director, Jennifer?
Yes.
Yes, sir, I have. And actually, we had a phone conference not too long ago with Ms. Amato, Mr. Huster, Mr. Bryant Spivey, and Chandra Farmer to discuss the details, and I have reviewed all of the documents in your package and recommend approval.
Good, good.
All right, any other questions? Yes, sir. Can you lean into the microphone over there?
The most difficult part will be just the time of construction, when people will have to go around the detours.
There is a very large detour. Rather than making a detoured bridge underneath the existing bridge, we are actually closing it off and having people take, it's approximately 9.5 to 10 miles going around. And this will last for approximately 6 months.
We're going to catch a lot of lip about that. Yeah. Because traffic going to that particular area is pretty high.
The Ag Center. And have y'all considered a temporary culvert? I know the DOT got plenty of them sitting on their yard and making a temporary culvert. Maybe if we give you a little more easement in there for the traveling public to make a diversion around the bridge until you get it built?
I can take that back to my engineers and see what
I
they
think
say.
that would be, we're talking 6 months, and we're talking about a lot of displacement of travelers, and that's going to be a a real problem for us.
I think it's a good suggestion.
I think if you put a culvert in there, it would be not be hard to size that culvert.
And that can,
Temporary culvert in.
yeah, Commissioner, that could affect the farm interest down in that area too, as far as
Oh, yeah.
the,
9 miles, a long way to carry a piece of farm equipment.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
so please take that message back.
I will take it back, and I'll let Mr. Hess and Jennifer and everybody know what their answer is. How's that?
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll hold on to that till we hear back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Mr. Mike Winslow with the North Carolina Forestry Service here to request an increase in funding.
Oh, my gosh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Mike Winslow. I'm the county ranger for the North Carolina Forest Service here in Johnston County. My staff and part of our responsibilities are preventing and controlling wildfires and also assisting private landowners with their forest management needs. Where it stands right now, our budget is a total of $357,500, with the county paying 40% of that budget. I know it's highly unusual for us to come outside of the normal budget request process, but we have had a few impacts to our budget that were not known to us until recent. One was we were informed of a revision to our compensation structure and pay scale. Also, the legislature approved a 3.5% salary increase for everybody. We had anticipated 2.5%. With this new revision to our compensation structure, also included another 5% for forestry technician 1s and 2s, forestry technicians meaning rangers, like assistant county rangers like on my staff or county rangers like myself. The next item is we have required a new truck, but the new truck did not arrive in time. We did request a truck last year, 21-22 year. However, because of the late delivery of the truck, it's coming out of this year's budget. Now, if we had just had the truck and the 2.5% increase, we probably could have absorbed it from our operating budget. But with the extra 5%, the truck, the 3.5%, there's no way we can absorb this. It did decrease our operating budget from $64,480 to around $39,000. And at this time, we are requesting a $9,800 increase to $152,800 for this year. Now, the state, the money's already there for the state to put in their share, but I had to come and obviously request from the county as well.
Mr. Chairman, I had raised a question during agenda review was if the money wasn't spent in the previous year for the vehicle, could that carry over? But I understand it just wasn't expended. Therefore, I'm in favor of going ahead and approving this request of $9,800.
Are you talking about a 23 budget, Mike, or are you talking about now?
This year's budget, 22-23 budget, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Maybe I worded that.
Yeah, I moved we approve the $9,800.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? Yes, sir.
I will say that the North Carolina Forest Service is famous for trying to do so much with so little.
Yep.
And I commend you for the job you're doing. And having spent 30 years in fire protection and fire safety and emergency response, these individuals, you guys do something that nobody else in this county can do. Every fire department in the county has great capabilities to do fantastic work. But when that tractor and plow pulls up, that's what makes the difference in a situation where you can't stretch hose. And so there is no way that we can function in a wildfire situation without your services. And so we appreciate what you do.
Yes, sir.
And I'm
Thank you.
definitely in favor of this increase in funding. And I'm still amazed and marveled that you can do all that you do on what little money that you get to do it with.
And all you got to be is around one time when it's a major fire and they get on that dozer and put that plow in. And those guys, they risk their lives to save property.
Yes, sir.
That's a great sound when something bad's going on and you've done all you can do and you hear that tractor start unloading. That's a great sound. So
Sir, the sound of the helicopter.
we
too.
appreciate
The cavalry.
that Bambi bucket sounds good. I'm done, sir.
All right, well, we have a motion, I don't recall a second, so.
Yes.
Second, okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Mike, you've been here before for many years at budget time.
Yes, sir.
You didn't know this at your particular budget time?
No, sir. Actually, the full impact, well, the truck situation wasn't definitely known till around 1st of June. The other, as far as the change in the compensation, we knew that was coming. We just didn't know how much it was going to impact us until probably late August, I believe. That's what we knew, and that's what we went from there.
All right, any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Chad McLam to present on the reimbursement resolution for water and sewer system revenue bonds. Mr. McLam?
Yes, sir. Staff requests the board to adopt a reimbursement resolution for the water and sewer system revenue bonds. The county has and will anticipate spending advancing funds for certain capital costs regarding the existing water and wastewater system. And we're just seeking a resolution to reimburse us out of the proceeds of the revenue bonds. That's obviously a board decision at that time, but we want to have a resolution in place to allow us to reimburse ourselves as we advance funds for the system before we get them sold.
Any questions? Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the resolution.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I've got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Is Martha here?
She's not here today.
We might have to adjust this minutes. It shows her here.
I know. Yes, I'm taking over. I'm stepping in for the real professional.
Okay. That's fine. Right is right.
Thank you for catching that, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just caught it on here. Paula told me so.
Yeah.
All right, so we have, do we have a motion in a second? All right, so all in favor of the motion? Ted, you're rubbing off on me. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Let me get rid of that one. All right, next up, we have our counsel, Jennifer Slusser, to present a resolution approving amount for a school project site.
Yes, good afternoon, evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before you have a resolution approving the amount to be spent by the Johnston County Board of Education to acquire a real property site to be used for a school project. As you know, North Carolina general statutes require that you approve the amount spent by the Board of Education for the purchase of a site or the expenditure of funds. And the Johnston County Board of Education has identified a site on the north side of Talbot Farm Road, and it's approximately 90 acres at a purchase price of $2.7 million. Johnston County and Johnston County Public Schools intend to work collaboratively in the review of this site for opportunities for parks and open space and greenways. And this will allow the Johnston County Board of Education to confirm the suitability of this site for a future school site prior to closing. And certainly, as has happened in the past, Johnston County Public Schools will keep us posted throughout the due diligence process. But certainly, this is a request from the Board of Education, and you have a resolution before you for your consideration.
All right, any questions?
Yes. My understanding is, I thought that we were going to approve it by price per acre. Is that, and I see the total amount, but is there some reason why we would have to use price per acre? Or can we use the total price?
You can use the total price because we've identified the acreage.
Okay, all right.
Just for,
Any other questions? Yes.
sorry, just for public record, for those that are watching, can you, or have they told us are they doing elementary, middle, or high school?
I don't have the answer to that question.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, then we have somebody can answer it in here. As a high school, for sure, I'm not sure it includes the middle school. It's just the high school portion. Okay. Okay.
I know there'd been some discussion. I just, for those watching, I figured there'd be questions, so we could just clarify.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Did I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the amount for the school project site at 90 acres at $2,700,000.
As it's stated in the resolution?
Yes, that's stated in the resolution.
All right.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Lester, you have one more on capital funding.
Yes, sir, I do. Before you have a proposed resolution to amend allocations to the Johnston County Public Schools for the 2022-2023 school year. The Johnston County Board of Education met this morning and approved a resolution requesting reallocation of $8 million from the current expense fund to capital outlay. To refresh your recollection with regards to this, when you passed your budget on June the 20th, 2022, you appropriated $85,573,000 to the current expense fund, but you did not appropriate any money to Johnston County Public Schools capital outlay. Johnston County Public Schools have notified us that they've got some important capital school needs that need to be addressed, and they have requested that we reallocate from that $85,573,000, $8 million of that, which would bring the current expense fund to $77,573,000. And so essentially what they are asking for is a reallocation of that 85 to move 8 of that, or us to move 8 of that to capital. And in the resolution, what we've got is that that you're amending the appropriation and reallocating that $8 million, and that we're also saying that we agree that the $85,573,000 that you originally appropriated on June the 20th, 2022 for current expense fund is the number that we will use for the 2022-2023 fiscal year for purposes of the statute. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we adopt a resolution approving the reallocation of $8 million from the current expense fund to the capital outlay fund as requested.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
And we have determined that it meets all the statutory requirements.
It does, sir.
Okay.
I just wanted to, again, for public record, note that we have a list of everything that $8 million is going to be spent on, and a timeline of where it's going and what it's for, and I appreciate the department, or I appreciate y'all putting that together, and the Board of Education putting that together, so we know exactly where all these dollars are going.
I'm just happy we're getting it done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. All in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank
Motion
you.
carries. Thank you. All right, next we have discussion of the draft 2024-2033 state transportation improvement program. I think this is one thing I'd asked to be brought up. Thank you for sending the spreadsheet, Branson. I don't know if you want to come up. I don't have any real thing. I don't know if the board has any questions or you have any comments. But
I've got a comment. I'm on the advisory board for the Upper Coastal Plain RPO, and I was out of state when we had that September meeting, but I have talked with James Salmon since then, and he went over the changes. Mostly what he said was checks in the mail.
Yes, funding is a little bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, cash flow, which as I stated previously, there are a number of projects that you'll see with a 2027 or 2029 construction start date. A lot of these projects have actually been delayed. The 42 widening between NC 50 back to 70 business is one of those that was originally supposed to be in a construction start, I think, of 2023. So I'd be glad to take any additional comments the board may have. If by email or otherwise, and I'll get those quickly to Campo and Upper Coastal Plain, as I think they're preparing to submit from both the RPO and the MPO. They're preparing to submit those to the state.
Okay, yeah, after looking, I don't have anything really to change. I mean, there's a lot of work on the interstates and future interstates on here, but I guess the one thing going forward is with the transportation plan update that we're starting to work on, or at least get an RFQ out, or making a decision on that, is as we're going forward, we can look to maybe making some impact on this and looking at all modes of transportation. So maybe not changes this time, but hopefully once we get the plan updated, we can have some other additional items on here. So
We have a little more leverage, I think.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And I'm almost done with the thoughts that I had. When do you want those by? When's the deadline for that? So you
By end of the week, if you can do that, that'd be
Absolutely.
fine. That'd be
Thank
great. Thank you.
all right, any other questions, comments on that? Almost one there. No, you good? All right. So Braston, I think the next item up is discussion, the board's discussion of the draft comprehensive land use plan. So if you want to, I think last time we discussed how we were going to do this. I think we talked about section, we said page by page, but I think we interpreted that as section by section rather than page by page. But, and I don't know that as we're moving forward in this, we talked about timeframes last time, and haven't had the chance to think on that a little bit. I'd rather us get this right because it's been 13 years since we've updated it, and a lot of thought really needs to go in as we're looking at 20, 30 years down the road of what we want Johnston County to look like. So I don't know that I think I mentioned maybe earlier end of this year, but it may be as late as early next year before we get it done. But I just want to make the public know that, yeah, we want to make sure we get it right.
That's correct.
As we go forward with it. So with that, I'll open it up for any introductions that you have, and then we'll dive in.
Yes, sir. So once again, we do have with us our lead consulting team, which is Meg Nealon and Ben Hitchings. And if they're willing to come forward, and we can begin going through the four sections of the plan.
Any other board comments before we dive off to the deep end? Yes, sir.
I might need Paula's help to get the electronic copy because I forgot my other copy. Is it in Dropbox?
I can't find it.
It is.
Where's it at?
LUP, all combined sections. Right above the today's meeting.
Yeah. Right. So I will say, is the maps separate, or they're in the document itself when we go to talk about maps? Because we got two documents in there. One is the draft, and the other is map draft.
That's the future land use map, their draft.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
But is it all in the main?
It's in there. I think there's just more detail with
Okay,
the separate
okay.
map.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so we may need to flip back and forth. Okay.
That'd be no problem.
What do you say it was?
Okay. Right, yeah, got it.
Had a little struck.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. All right, we're ready. I think the middle part's ready.
Yeah.
We have a representative form of government. You know, it's not a true democracy because everybody doesn't vote on every issue or any issue that comes up. But I dare say, if you allowed the citizens of Johnston County to vote on slowing growth, you'd get probably 80% of vote to do that. The question is, how do we do it? How do we do it the right way? So it's a task before us that we need to do it right.
Yes, sir. Agreed. At this time, we'll bring Ms. Meg Nealon and Mr. Ben Hitchings forward if you'd like to start going through a plan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome back.
Thank you for having us back.
We'll be seeing a lot. Maybe we've seen a lot of you guys over the next few meetings. So
That's good.
yeah. So I don't know if you want to. If anybody have comments ready, or we want to let them give an overview of the first section, and then let's dive in. I don't want to do that. Once you give an overview, and then we'll follow in right behind you
Sure, absolutely. And Mr. Hitchings can help me if I miss a detail. So the first section is devoted to setting the stage for what purpose this plan serves. And so as we talked last time, it is a policy guide. It's intended to be a communication tool, but also as an elected board, this board and appointed boards and staff and others who play a role in thinking about and taking action on things that will affect the future of Johnston County. This is that section that explains why we even do it. Why do plans matter? What kinds of questions do they answer? What kinds of decisions do plans like this inform? So there are a lot of things that range from capital investments to your regulatory framework that should be, the guidance should come from this plan. So that's the purpose of this chapter, is just to set the stage for that. Is there anything you want to add to that? Okay.
All right, just so we're all looking at the same section, I don't know if you skipped over the introductory stuff, but let us know we're the same place you're, okay, I need to look up from my screen, huh? Okay. So any questions or comments on the introduction piece? All right, we'll roll on to the next section then.
Okay, so I think we are, yeah. So this is the section 2, and it establishes sort of that baseline of where we are today, generally. The reason we do this is as we contemplate the issues and opportunities to anticipate in the future and ways that we want to seize some of those opportunities while we're addressing those issues, it's important to bring those to light. So at the beginning of a process like this, we spend time looking at the wide range of issues. With a comprehensive plan, we're looking beyond just land use and development issues. We're looking at a number of factors that affect where development occurs, how it's supported, and so on. But it also acknowledges the things that are special about a place like this. And so it's the natural environment, it's the cultural assets, things of that nature. So when we think about all of that together, there are some things that the community is regularly talking about. So this section is not meant to be an exhaustive explanation of all the existing conditions, but instead highlight the things that were surfaced as the most important to the community. So as we ask people through the meetings, through interviews, and through surveys, we found out some common themes. And blended with the first couple pages here highlight themes and emerging trends. So it starts to blend what we're seeing happening nationally and in North Carolina with the things that your community is thinking about all of the time. And so that's those couple of pages preface the situation, and then we have some details under each of those topics about what's really happening in Johnston County. So it's through that explanation that we're shedding light on what are those things that are really challenging for the county, and what are the things that may be on the horizon that you don't want to miss. So putting the pieces in place. So it helps people understand, okay, what's our starting point? And if we're looking 20 years out, if we're going to be different than we are today, we need to know where we are at this moment in time. So the section takes you through a wide variety of topics there that touch again on land use and development, but also touches on some of the things that are worthy of conservation and the infrastructure supporting all of that. Do you want to add to any of those details?
Sure, yeah. And like any situation, where we find ourselves today and as we look into the future, we not only have lots of challenges, but we also have some great opportunities. And so it's really a mix of those two things. And sometimes we get focused on our challenges and don't always think about, well, gosh, we've got some things we could do as a result of the dynamics that are in play that, would continue to develop the county in a positive way.
All right, and I think, go ahead, Commissioner Smith, yeah.
I'd like to deal with your discussion about agriculture and forestry. And I'd like to suggest we have about 224,000 acres of forest land. In our county, we have about 183,000 acres of farmland, which makes up a big part of our county. Provides about 12% of our revenue, though, to run government. So we need to realize that when we look at our budget, that residential housing provides 67% of the revenue for Johnston County. But that's not the main thing I want to talk about. The main thing I want to talk about, which is this statement, more efforts are needed to protect the county's working lands. What does that mean?
Sure, and that that statement also is a product of the planning process and the different input that we got. But when we talk about the working landscape, we're thinking of lands that are managed for food and fiber, particularly. Sure. It would include exactly the kinds of lands that you had identified, Commissioner Smith, the ag land and forest land.
Well, what do you plan on doing? I mean, that's just a philosophical statement, okay? That what are you going to do, or what do you envision? Because farmers, that's their business, that's their wealth, that's their retirement.
Absolutely.
Do you envision that we in any way take any of that away from them?
We know that agriculture wouldn't happen if a farmer didn't want to farm. So that sort of was our starting point as it relates to the working landscape. One of the things we heard a lot of in the public workshops and in the survey was how important the working landscape and that way of life is to the county and to the people of the county. And we, of course, have a wonderful tradition, as you and many others are part of. And so, of course, when we get to the next section.
Let me stop you right there. So, because people in the county love to see farmland, do they have a right to require that people keep farming that land, even if they're losing money?
That's an interesting question that y'all would, that is one for y'all to answer. We don't.
I like barbecue restaurants. So do I have the right to tell Patrick Harris that he's got a barbecue restaurant and I want him to keep a barbecue restaurant?
Don't shut it down.
And if he wants to do something else with his space, I don't want him to do that because I like eating barbecue at his restaurant. How would you like if I did that to you, Patrick?
I wouldn't like it at all.
No.
It's my decision.
That's right. It's your decision.
Exactly.
And so I think, to me, this is a critical case, a critical issue, because this can be inverse condemnation of people who've worked all their life in this county to make a living farming, most of which came from tobacco, which is a declining industry. When I came to this county in the ancient times, everybody basically almost had tobacco, and they could make a living on their farm with their tobacco. And then they just had other crops. Well, slowly but surely, tobacco has given way to where now soybeans is the largest income producer in this county. It's tough to live off soybeans. And so I just want us to be aware that most of the folks who own farmland in this county, as you point out, are north of 55 years old. They have worked all their lives. The agricultural, the ability to make a living on tobacco and agriculture in this county is diminishing. And I just think we owe it to those people not to do anything to hurt the fact that they've worked all their life to build something of value. We don't need to come along of the heavy hand of government to take that away from them.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask some questions. In all the public meetings and all the mailings and however you were contacted, how many total people would you say you heard from? In all the meetings, a total people?
We had a number. It's actually in our data, I believe, in the introductory section. It was thousands.
North of 3,000.
Yeah, I was going to say it's
It was
3 something, I thought.
I thought it's
Yeah,
close
it
to
was close-
4,000.
We
close to
have a
4,000.
county here of 220,000 plus. That's an awful small percentage of the input. And what I want to get across is, we had a lady here tonight that really is upset because they're developing a subdivision next to a piece of property that she bought years ago. And my take on that is very important to her because it's going to affect her. So she's going to go to the meeting. She's been here several times, but are we sure that we've not been contacted by just people that would only be affected very brazenly by any changes? Or do we know we've got a good mix of the population that we're representing here? Because we don't want to overstep. How many times can we look and see where governing boards have done too much and trying to straighten something out that actually made it much more worse? And from my standpoint, I think let's look at the people it affects. Like Mr. Smith pointed out, farmers. If you had a large congregation of farmers in that 3,000, you're going to hear more comments about farming. If there were developers, you'd hear more comments about developing. But we have to make sure that whatever decisions we make, that we include the entire population of this county, not just the people the 3,000 people that showed up at these meetings, because the rules we make are going to affect everybody. They're not going to affect one sector. They're going to affect everybody equally. And I, for one, think that there's so many things. Growth is almost an impossibility to stop. I think stopping growth is an impossibility because of our geographical location, the facilities we already have in place for the growth, and we have set our budgets up and everything based on growth. And I just think we need to be really careful that whatever we do, that we consider all the citizens of this county, not just 3,000 out of 220. So as we talk about these various things, let's make sure that we don't take the comments that were made and put so much value on them because they came from such a small percentage of people, that we need to talk amongst ourselves and come up with our own conclusions, because we're the ones that's going to have to make the final decision.
Well, let me jump in here, and I'm not going to argue the difference between what you and making very good points, but I don't understand the sentence. Okay, we got voluntary agriculture districts with the word voluntary in front of it. People get to choose. So because people don't choose, the sentence sounds like we need to do more. And so I just don't like the sentence, because it is a voluntary agriculture district. People voluntarily go to it. And if they hadn't chose to do that, well, that's their issue. We're not here to force it. But to say that because there's only 18,000 acres because of voluntary ag district, that we need to do something, I don't agree with that, because it's voluntary. Now, I'm not going to, we'll let these two have at it or talk about their issue, but I just don't like the way the sentence sounds. It doesn't sound right to me.
Tony, let me be sure I understand what are you saying?
I'm saying only because, what I'm saying is, the way I interpret this sentence, because only 18,000 acres are covered under the voluntarily ag district. Wait, let me finish.
Okay.
That it was voluntary. That's all that chose to do that.
That's not what that sentence says. What you have to look at that sentence, you have to go back and look at the map.
Yep.
That they produced in section 1.
What do you mean that's not what the sentence says?
Okay, and when they talk about working lands, they're not talking about the voluntary ag district. They're talking about the 183,000 acres.
Okay, yeah.
That is farmland.
I'm not that deep in that, Commissioner. What I'm saying is, the sentence as it reads, only about 18,000 acres of the 183 acres in farmland are enrolled in the voluntarily agricultural district program, period. Okay, suggesting more efforts. Now, why are we suggesting more efforts when it's voluntarily for those folks to choose where they want to do that or not, okay? You understand what I'm saying?
Okay. I think you missed what they're saying here. If you go back up to the first, what this says is, they're talking about how agriculture, and then they say, they're highlighting the continued importance of farming in the county. And they say they want more farmland to stay there. Now, I'm for farmland. I think my actions speak louder than my words, but I just want to make sure that when we, for instance, I just want to make sure that when we adopt a map, that we don't take the value of their farms, that they are pigeonholed for that, rather than the ability to use their farm for other uses when they want to get out of farming, when they can no longer be profitable in farming. I just think that's critical. To me, that's the most important issue in this plan.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If I might comment, I think what this thing is saying, Tony, is that 10% of the land is in those areas that are getting heavily urbanized, and they feel threatened enough to enroll in that program. The rest of it is probably in the eastern part of the county that's not.
Okay, so, but there's no need for us to have to take it.
Right.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
But what Commissioner Smith said, and maybe Dickie Braswell said as well, I don't think farmers, prior to what happened at 4042, I don't think farmers ever farmed with the idea in the back of their mind that they're going to one day cash out. Now, it has presented itself because of what's been happening with all this wild residential growth. But I still don't think the farmers operate in that mode. And I understand what Commissioner Smith said. Government shouldn't choose winners and losers by their actions. But it happens all the time. When your neighbor gets a $950 a month lease on his cell phone tower, and you didn't, well, and the tax incentives to put up solar farms, it affects some people and some people missed it. What I'm getting at is, and if you go to any circles I go in, any of them, 100% are a heavy majority of less slow growth. Church, military, let me finish.
I'm going to go ahead and let you finish, but I'm not talking about slowing growth. I'm not talking about increasing growth. I'm simply saying, and I must not be saying...
Is this letting me finish?
Go ahead and finish. Go ahead.
Growth can still take place, but what I'm saying is it ought to be pushed to the urban areas and leave the open area. I mean, if we were to make the minimum lot size in the agriculture areas such that it's not attractive to developers.
We ain't got there yet.
No, what I'm saying is that would impact how their land could be flipped or changed.
But still, I don't think, I must not be saying what I'm saying.
Let's let Commissioner Stevens, she's been wanting to talk.
You heard what I'm saying.
I hear what you're saying. And to piggyback on what all of you are saying, I agree. We should not control what anybody can or cannot do with their land. I don't think anybody up here was surprised when you presented this, that the rest of the county wants to slow growth and doesn't want to see as much growth, and they want to see more farmland. And I don't think anybody up here disagrees with that. I think the only way we're going to accomplish that is to incentivize more farmers to keep their farms as farms. And what you're saying is, we have this program out there that only 18% of people are actually using. And one of the things in here is, if we promote an incentive program for more people to be in the voluntary ag district, that is something that will help solve this problem if the landowners are the ones that are participating in this. I for one, would be, I'm excited to have the conversation amongst us as how can we incentivize farmers to keep their farms? But at the same time, they have to sign up for it. They have to choose to do it. We can't make them, just like we can't make them not sell their land.
There's nothing that we can do if anybody wants to sell their farm to anybody. There's nothing we can do. And there's, I haven't, and I think Vice Chairman Harris had the best comment the other night, and we were talking about the same thing. He said, I'm not going to be the one to go out there and tell that person that you can't sell your farm. That's naturally got to take place. I don't think we can stop it. Go ahead, I'm sorry. I won't butt in no more.
No. Ted, I want to address something you said, which is right. The best way to have farmland is for farmers to make a profit farming. If farmers can make a profit from whatever source, whether it be their crops, the government subsidies, or some other things that we may be able to do that some of us are working on, they will farm. If they're losing money, they can't farm. That's a way to bankruptcy. But Ted, what really happens? The reason most farmers, and this is the world I live in, the reason most farmers sell is the children have gone to town.
Yeah.
And they don't want to do the hard, dirty labor that it takes to make a living on a farm. And they've gone to Raleigh, and they're living the good life. And there's nobody to take care of that farm. And so the parents are left with no other choice, because they can't farm it, the kids are gone, and they've got to figure out what they're going to do in their retirement years. And y'all need to help me understand this map. What the map that you have, and you talk about uses, and you put agricultural use, and then some places you put single family use, and some places you put other uses. Does that pigeonhole that land that it can only be used for what's in that, what color it has? Well, what does that color mean then? Help me understand what that color means. And we all know what affects us. And I look up there on the Wake County line, and I see my ranch, and it's the only thing up there that's got the green agriculture, and everything else around it has other zoning. So I'm saying, what does that mean? Does that mean because I've decided that I want to use my land for agriculture because that's what I love, that forever that's pigeonholed like that in my kids, when I'm gone or stuck, that's got to be agriculture? Tell me what that means.
I take this, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I take this as a guidebook, almost like we do when we are looking at commercial projects. Is this in our long-term land use plan? When we are looking at large PUDs and developments, we're looking at this map and going, how does this fit in with what our comprehensive use plan says, so that we can give the planning board guidance on what we would like to see, but not anything that we can necessarily restrict. Does that make sense?
But April, suppose, I'm just using this as hypothetical. I'm banging me up and probably get criticized in the paper for talking about my own personal stuff, but we'll do that. Suppose 5 years from now, like you say, this is a guidebook, and I get run over by a bus, and my kids say, we don't want these cows. And they come in here and they say, well, we want to put a PUD in there. Is the county, the commissioners, or the planning board would say, you can't do that because under the planning thing, we had planned for that to be agricultural land. That was our guidance, and that's what we wanted it to be. So they've got a presumption that they've got to overcome, that other people don't have to overcome.
Have a stab at it. No, have a stab at that.
So,
Yeah, but to me, and I hear what, and I'll jump in a little bit, is we're coming from what you're describing. We're coming from AR across everything, which is kind of what got us here. I agree with Commissioner Stevens that I look at this as a guidebook for what's going to happen, but I won't be here in 4, 5, 10, 20, however how long I want. Somebody else is going to be sitting up here making decisions. So I see your concern that the presumption is that's agriculture, and that's what it's going to be, and we won't have any say in that.
I've learned for what, look, you can take this, you can put it in the trash can if you want to, but I've learned that you can never trust government because you don't know who's going to sit in the seats in the next, down the future. And they don't know necessarily why things got adopted. And they become hidebound and just agree on those. And I'm thinking about other people too. I use myself as an example, but I'm thinking about other people too. And to me, this is critical because so many people, and farmers are not going to be the people that are going to come to your groups. They're not the people who came to your group. The people who came to your groups were people who are the not in my backyard, people who don't want growth. So they're the ones who came. They were small proportion but large voice.
Yep.
Whereas farmers, they're too busy working at home. They're not going to come do that. But this is going to affect them. And I want to make sure they're protected.
Commissioner, yeah, go ahead.
I do want to say something about the character of the different participants in the process. We did actually have some folks who identified themselves as farmers. They talked about the challenges of coming after working in the fields to try and make an evening meeting. So there were different perspectives represented. And we also had a good geographic.
I'm sure of that, but I was just talking about the majority of the folks who came.
Commissioner Harris.
I just think that and I think everybody's brought up some very good and valid points, and it's a good discussion to have. The thing that I'm overly concerned about is I don't want to inadvertently devalue anyone's property. You know, Commissioner Smith talked about a restaurant. Well, it's a barbecue restaurant today, but if somebody shows up with a check big enough and wants to turn it into a shoe store, that's my decision to make, and I don't want the government making that decision for me. And I think that's where we are, at least that's where I'm at with this. If, you know, my house or my property or whatever I have, that's my decision to make, and I don't think that, you know, as long as it's not going to inadvertently affect, you know, my neighbors, I don't think there's room to put so many regulations. I just don't want to devalue someone's property. And that farmer who has worked their whole life and passed it down from generation to generation, and their children or grandchildren, they decide they don't want to farm anymore, which happens, it's a reality. They should have all the options on the table to be able to do with their land what they want to do. It belonged to their family for 100 years. If they want to sell it to a developer, they want to sell it to a whatever, you know, to turn it into a park. That's their decision to make. And I think we just have to be careful Because if we start doing too much regulation, then we're going to inadvertently devalue somebody's property, because you're going to say, this type of growth can't go in this area. And so if your land's in this area, you're just out of luck. And I just don't think that's where we need to go.
My concern is that we overvalue and stimulate people to sell who might not otherwise have. Does that make sense?
If your asset appreciates in value, that's never a bad thing.
That's right. Now, what Commissioner Stevens brought up is the voluntary agriculture district. But when you read, as I understand it, the agreement you sign is for generations. You're taking a man that owns property today, and he's committing his children and his children's children and his children's children to an easement that he might say, well, hey, all of a sudden I'm not making money, and I'm losing my money, and I can't keep the land, but I agree to keep it in.
Let me help with that. That's not what this voluntary agricultural district is.
You just record it so that people can't
There's the
lose.
permanent agricultural district where a farmer gets paid.
Right.
That's what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
He sells the development rights, and it's binding forever. Okay, that's one thing. This voluntary agricultural district is when a farmer says, for 10 years, I want to farm this. It has no value. It doesn't do anything except put the neighbor on notice that there's a farm going there. For instance, I just had a tract of land I bought that was in an agricultural deal. It's going to be part of my ranch. You can revoke that. I revoked that voluntary agricultural district because I didn't need it and I wanted to put it as part of the ranch. So anybody who has a voluntary agricultural district that this is talking about can revoke it on the spot. It doesn't bring any value. There's no economical monetary value to these voluntary districts, whereas there is when you, quote, sell your development rights forever.
Can I comment on that? I was in a ag advisory committee last Thursday, I believe it was, about these easements, and they're typically now for 20 years. You pay the farmer, and he agrees to farm it for 20 years. That's what most of them are dealing with now.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
So you're saying we pay the farmer?
Who does that?
The Department of Agriculture has a committee that they grade. You have to apply for it, the grant, and it goes through a grading process. And if it's approved, then they buy they buy the easement, and then the farmer has agreed to farm it, or his heirs, for 20 years, or whatever that particular arrangement is.
But that's not selling the development rights, is it? No.
Yeah, well, he's got to still farm it for 20 years. He's paid. He's paid right then, and he's put some money in his pocket, but he's got to still farm it.
Ted, I'm not saying that's not true, but if you're right, you've taken me to school tonight. I may go check on that.
What's going to happen if he loses money after the third year and he can't afford to keep farming it?
You got to farm it that way.
I want to go back just to the sentence we've been reading, which is, if people are following at home, was on page 19, that says, at the same time, only about 18,000 acres of the 183,000 acres in farmland are enrolled in the voluntary ag district program, suggesting more efforts are needed to protect the county's working lands. And what I look at, I know it's about the economics. So you have, and later I think in the plan we talk about the more efforts that can be. It can be some incentives that we can come up with. It can be an enhanced agriculture. There's a lot of things that we can do to make that where the farmer that wants to keep on farming, that we can make that, and Commissioner Smith admitted, that incremental change that allows them to stay in business. So I think the 18,000, there are things we can do through more efforts that will get that 18,000 number up for those farmers who want to continue farming. But I think there's a lot of options there that we'll eventually get to talk about, including some of the, you'd mentioned incentives. I don't know if that's the right word we should use if our attorney would look at us crossways when we say that, but I think there's a lot of things. I think there are things there that we are, kind of looking at the same time as we're looking at this land use plan to make that possible. So,
is it fair to go back and the question that Commissioner Smith asked about his current land, that it shows on the map? So this is the area you would assume it would be AR, right? Zoned AR.
Could be,
Yeah.
That
could be.
could be.
There won't be any AR.
Well,
Could be an
Agriculture.
agricultural voluntarily.
okay.
No, that's not right. It's not a volunteer. When you put green up on there, no farmer agreed to that. You just put it there. Those are not agricultural districts. You just put green and said, this land is on your map.
I read it kind of as it's the current highest and best use of in their opinion, of that piece of property would be. But I hear you, that's my interpretation.
When you say highest and best use.
In light of feedback from the citizens.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So what he's looking for, so that, does that basically took the existing use, which is what most of it is now, and just decided that's what it was going to
Yeah.
stay?
No.
So how did
So
you come
let's
up with
talk
the
about that. So we're in
let's get to
section
that.
2 talking about what we gathered through the process, right? So some of the questions I'm hearing were about participation. Was it enough? A second question was about were farmers even involved? Did we even hear from them? How could this possibly represent their point of view? A third question was about the map itself. How did we arrive at that? Why is the green where the green is? And a fourth question was about, aren't we actually running the risk of devaluing property with our governmental actions? So I can answer those four if you think that
That
captures
sounds like
the
an excellent
questions. Okay.
thing to do.
So in terms of participation, the numbers we were actually pretty pleased with. As counties go, that was a pretty high number. Normally, we see less than 2,000. One thing we do find in a process like this, especially when we give people different avenues to submit their ideas and reactions to things, is that the first 10% of the input that we get, the other 90% we get in the process, regardless of the numbers, tends to reinforce the first 10% that we heard. So they become recurring themes. So when you see some of these big picture notes in section 2, which is all about today's existing conditions, it's capturing input, it's capturing what we are seeing in the data, it's capturing the things that we're seeing on the ground. It's a whole host of things, and that overlap suggests that, wow, this just keeps coming up over and over and over again. So the pure numbers of having heard from every single person in the county, that we haven't seen that ever in any project, but we also feel pretty confident that what we're seeing in these processes is that there is a reinforcement. So when we pick up on these themes, those are the things we want to investigate and see if in the development of the goals, which are really important to go back to, when everything else changes, do the goals hold? And so we go through that step in section 2 to report back these things that were these recurring themes, and that informs the goal statements that not only help us shape the plan, but also serve elected and appointed boards and staff for many years to come. So those are good guideposts to go by. The other question you had was about the farmers. I might be a magnet for folks in agriculture, but I talk to a lot at our meetings, and I wanted to share some stories of some folks that we heard from in the North Carolina 50 corridor who were farmers, and like Mr. Hitchings said, some of them scrambled to get to the meeting, make sure we did open house style to give people a chance to get there on time frames that mattered for them. There were several representing different farms, and some of them were family members, some of them not, but had been, according to them, farming for generations. And the things that they said to us were, we're having a hard time staying on our farms because this urbanization that's coming at us, and the 50 corridor is in that path, is really making it a struggle for us. The encroachment of new development, the fragmentation that's happening, In our last presentation, you saw that picture of the tractor out there and cars lined up behind the tractor. So that kind of stuff, when you get that fragmentation, it's really hard to keep farming. So we heard from folks like them saying there needs to be some things that are done with the management of growth so that we don't find ourselves backing off our property lines and backing off our property lines and eventually just completely tapping out. The other thing we have heard, and this is true in every county in North Carolina we've ever worked in, is that, and it's along the lines of what you're describing, the folks who are in it, they probably didn't go into farming with the intent of cashing out, but they are at that point where they recognize that my heirs don't want to do this. I might not have anybody to sell to who also wants to be a farmer, and this is my 401k. So if there's anything about this plan, it starts to bring in choices across the board. So the whole intent of the map and the descriptions of the place types and the recommendations that are put forward are to expand the range of choices that you don't presently have today. So in the last presentation, we showed you your current future land use map, and we showed you the zoning map. And it's pretty much, especially the zoning, it's a solid color, which says to us, for all the choices everybody's asking for, whether they're asking for housing choices, places to eat and shop, places to work, those kinds of things, they're not getting choices. And then you still want to maintain choice in what happens with your property if you own real estate in this county. So that's sort of our recurring theme that we thought was important in this plan. So that is what you're seeing in a lot of the recommendations and the descriptions of what can happen in each of these areas. So the place types, so to go back to one of your questions about how did you even arrive at this map and what do these place types mean? Well, within that is a description of the character of those places, so that those place type descriptions are only meant to describe what's the nature at that place. If you walked through it, drove through it, flew above it, what would you expect to see in that area? And so it encompasses land use. It encompasses like an amount of open space, relatively speaking. It might speak to the circulation. You might only have sort of the farm to market 2-lane NCDOT roads there. You might have the massive widenings because you're closer to, and more connected streets because you're closer to the real urban centers within the county. So those are the kinds of things that you would find in the place types just as descriptors to say, some of them you have on the ground today, some of them are aspirational and you don't have them today, but we heard from the community that when you look back at the themes and the goals, if they were to have choices, that spread of places would include some aspirational things that you don't have today. So it expands out to say, you've got X, Y, and Z today, and then we're going to add an A, B, and C to be responsive to the community's desires. So the map begins to place those, and it's not just a random assignment of those place types, but instead, if you remember one of our earlier presentations, and this is in the plan, we go through what we call a suitability analysis that looks at what's the potential for different types of land uses across your entire geography. And what it tells us, and we look at it for residential, we look at it for commercial, we look at it for industrial, and we also often look at it for agriculture. But if you look at the first three, you kind of get a sense of, if you are a site locator for a company like Jones Lang LaSalle, what's your criteria for going and looking for sites that are going to be suitable? You're looking for properties that have certain attributes, right? And residential is going to be different than industrial typically. And so when we talk about value, we're looking at those opportunities to assign some place types to your geography that recognizes where the market's going and where that value is being created. Why does it have value? Because there's land there that's developable. There's land there that already has infrastructure serving it or could easily be served with some extensions and some other strategic moves on the part of the county and private investors. And then also the location. So, if you're all the way on the southeast side, you're pretty far from Raleigh, so the demand for land down there is different. So we see that variation across the landscape. So the placement of those place types that, again, represent some of what you have today and some of what you might have in the future because it's aspirational, we don't want to assign those place types to land where it's not likely to happen. we're looking at it through that lens and hopefully setting you up for some decision-making. So you're looking at saying, oh, well, if we're going to support more housing choices in these areas, we need to be confident that those are places that can actually be attractive to those who would go build those housing products. So there's a match there pretty closely. And then to your point, Commissioner Stevens, it serves as a policy guide to say, is this what we want to support? Should somebody come forward with a proposal? What it doesn't do is say no. It says, this is the likelihood, and that's, this is in keeping with that set of place types the community
But
wants
Meg,
to see.
a couple of things. You pointed out two things.
Mm-hmm.
You pointed out the second one was the farmer who didn't have any choice and was going to have to sell his or her land.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's right.
And I think that's the person we've got to protect. The first person you talked about was a farmer on Highway 50. What he's saying is that his farm is getting smaller because people who he used to rent land from have chosen on their own to sell their land and not to rent it for agriculture. That's the only way, other than the fact that there may be cars following his interfering with his tractor. But if he's saying that my farm is getting smaller, it's because he can't rent land, and because the other person has decided not to rent the land to him, okay? That's what that is. There's nothing that keeps a farmer from farming his or her land as long as they want to. No one stops that. Now, I just want to be sure I got this map. I want to be sure. What this map says, it says future, not present, future. Land use place type. I think what someone would say is what that means is that in the future, this is what you've got to do with that land, or this is where we want to place that land. And then, as I said, you've put light green all there, and so all the people who have land that's in the light green, you have placed their land in an agricultural rather than a low-density residential, medium-density residential. Any of these others, you've placed them down there, which is going to create a presumption that that's where it's going to stay. And that is, I'm afraid it's going to be taking people's land. So what other meaning could future land use place type be other than that? That's what we want it to be in the future.
So this is a living document, and as y'all are experiencing, you update it every 5 to 10 years or thereabouts.
I understand, but you have to understand, you've created a presumption that they've got to rebut. I mean, again, I hate to keep using myself, but you see that right there? You see that green right there? On the Wake County line. If you talk about land that's open for development, on the Wake County line, it would be on this side, you've got low-density residential. On this side, you've got a different thing, yet someone decided they want to make that agriculture. I don't understand how they did that, other than it's being used for agriculture today. And there are other people up here who I'm concerned are going to have the same problem.
So present use value is one of the factors that was taken into consideration to delineate the green. But I think you're raising an important question.
But present use value has nothing to do with zoning. Present use value has to do to help our farmers be able to continue to do that.
That's right.
And so in Johnston County, as of September, we had 3,234 owners who had property in present use value. 6,399 parcels, or 112,654 acres was in present use value. And so they put that there. When they take that out, they're gonna have to go back and pay taxes at the highest rate for the past 3 years. And I don't think anyone thought, when they put their land in present use value, that it was gonna have zoning ramifications.
Fred, I think you're putting too much in that map. She said a while ago, if you drove through it today or flew over it, that's what you expect to see there.
Then why don't we just put present land use, not future land use?
Well, it's a guide to somewhere in the future.
Why is it a guide to the future?
Throw it out the window then. We haven't adopted anything, but I think you put too much in it.
When you say that, I think that's what this whole document is a guide to the future.
Yeah.
I mean, at least that's what I'm thinking. When it says 2040, that's the future. So, I mean, I want it to be a guide for the future. I will say, I did want to get something in before I forget it. I think we had 4, maybe 5 people who make a living farming or in the agriculture industry on our committee. So there was some representation on there, and some of which aren't in the book, in the thing, so you might want to update the steering committee names. There's some missing out of there, so you might want to check on that. So, including, I think, the chairperson. I didn't see her name in there, but we just moved to update that. But I think that's where this is a document that's for the future, and I think that we're looking, I hope that future boards don't let this go 10, 12, 13. I think the 5 years as we get through this thing, that we need to look at, 5 years. I can't say we can't make it mandatory, but that needs to be practiced with where we're growing and how we're growing. Is we need to make sure we're updating this thing. And you mentioned fragmentation before, and I hate to use commissioner, but when I look and I see a little green dot in the middle of all that, that says fragmentation to me. Now, when I look at the other pieces that are green, I see less fragmentation. But when I look at a little, well, it's not such a little dot, but it shows up. But so I see fragmentation there. I have less concern where it's green in wide places. So
I have a suggestion. I mean, one thing the way to think about this map is it answers the question, if this is the palette of places we want to see 20 years from now in our county, what are the best places for those? So it's taking that palette. So there's been a heavy focus on the agriculture, but it's true for all of them. So if you look at every single one of those place types, and we're answering the question, where's the best place? If these are the things that you'd like to see as choices across your geography, where should they reasonably land? That's the pattern. And so the factors behind all of that are reasonable in terms of we're not going to put farmland onto something that's already developing for housing, for example. So I think the way to think about it, too, is it's respectful of some of the things that are already on the ground, so you're not throwing out what exists in your current development pattern. There's an acknowledgement of the activities that are already taking place on the ground, and we're not going to wipe the slate clean. But we are going to acknowledge those and then complement them with the place types in and around them. So you may see those little pockets popping up in here and there. That's because they are still recognized based on the criteria as viable agriculture. PUV is just one example, but just to go back to what I'm saying, it's a combination of the places you see on the ground today if you flew over Johnston County, and places you'd like to see in the future if you flew over Johnston County 20 years from now. And it answers the question, what are the best places for these place types to land, the most reasonable places? So does that, I mean, I'm just offering that as
I was going to say, for me, if I'm looking at in broad strokes, and I'm waving at the place types on the upper right-hand corner of that figure, is I think those are the place types. Now, as we get through it, there may be some additions that we need to add in there, but I think for the most part, those are the correct place types. And right now, we're arguing about where those place types go, but I think those place types are representative of the places we see in Johnston County's future. And again, when we get to other pieces, we may add one or take one out or combine or do something, but I think those are representative of place types that we'll see or want to see in our future.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think, we're not trying to be detrimental to anybody's property, but at the same time, if we can look at this and go encourage and incentivize for people to be in the places that it makes more sense, then I think we're going to create that trend, if that makes sense.
I have watched development for the last 40 years in this county, and you never can pinpoint where it might pop up, because some of the most unusual places that you would think that would have no real value is what the people start wanting. John Q. Public can be a very fickle individual. They'll change in a heartbeat. That's why we are constantly trying to keep up with schools. And I can remember a time when we had community schools, and now we're actually taking the schools to almost subdivision schools now. So, people change. And what I'm concerned about is the rules that we make here are going to affect future generations, and our future boards going to understand why we took the actions we took.
I think that's a key. What today is a suggestion could turn into a it shall be with future boards, depending on who's making those decisions at the time, especially when you've got maps that are very specific to.
But I'll just say, to me, the alternative is leaving it AR like it is, and I don't think that's been successful approach for this county.
I didn't say I had the answer. I just
yeah. I mean, so
Mr. Chairman, let me just getting to be close to 8 o'clock. Let me get us to page 79.
What section is that in?
That's I don't know the section. I know it's page 79.
It'll be like up section.
All right, well.
And GM3 talks about to envision Johnston through a structured implementation process. I just really think that that's in many ways the best thing in this report is that recommendation. And it talks about that developing an action plan, and then it talks about forming implementation committees to meet regularly to determine which way we need to go. And I just think it took 14 months to do this plan. I think we need to spend 2 or 3 or 4, whatever period of time it takes, and to have some committees, because they've put a lot of important stuff in this report. It's detailed, it's comprehensive, and I think to just sit here and talk, I think we need to have some committees, say a land use committee or infrastructure committee, to dive into this and come back with some recommendations to us.
I would agree, and I'd like to see the planning board be a part of those committees as well, so it's a collaborative effort.
Well,
hold on a second. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the same, because the planning board's already had say-so over it. So for me, when I'm reading implementation, and maybe Ben and Meg, you can help me out with this, I see that after adoption, then we're checking and make sure we're not hamstringing property owners and we're following the plan. But I do see that. Is that, can you give me a yes or no? Is that after the plan's adopted?
It's after the plan is adopted. Typically, you don't want to implement, I mean, you can start implementing a plan before it's adopted, but typically you start implementation the day after it's adopted.
Okay, so I don't want to, so I want to go, I think, in the direction, I'm not talking about implementation. We still got to get through this process, and we spent almost an hour and a half on basically one page.
One sentence.
So I am not opposed to having a committee that gets into the weeds, that meets regularly. I don't want to push it down the road. I want to meet regularly and provide updates to this board, but get into the weeds and then bring that report back to this board.
I've spent hours reading this thing. I mean, it's complicated and it's detailed, and I mean, if we just want to just pass over and say, yeah, we just agree, or do we want to get in here and understand what it means, what the consequences are, and do our job? And I think if we're going to do that, we'd be better off to break up into some committees who can work with Jennifer and the staff to help us, because there are legal questions in here. This is an important document that I just think we need to have some committees to rather than trying to be a committee of the whole. I mean, I really don't want to talk about water and sewer, because I don't bring anything to the table. I want Dickie and others to do that, because I don't bring anything. Then there are other things that I think I can help with, and if we do a deep dive, then we can make sure that we do a good job, that we get to move in to get the new ordinance in place, and I just think we need to do that.
All right. So if we can let's hold the committee thing, and we'll go back to that at the end. But I mean, after an hour and a half, I'm getting close to my attention span getting lost too. But let's go back to section 2. Any other comments on section 2, or anything y'all want to have us consider while we're finishing up section 2?
Let me go back.
While folks are looking, so I will ask, as we're talking about committees, or groups or subgroups or whatever we're talking about here, is to be thinking of those possibilities so that we're picking this thing apart, and then, like I said, not a committee of the whole. We'll eventually, everybody will have an input, while we're sitting up here, but something to move this along faster than one page in an hour and a half.
One sentence.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, but we did a little bit more than one sentence. We might do 3, but and a map. So
I do think it's a good approach to get really down into the weeds, because we got to get this right. I mean, this is really important.
Well, I was here when we did the first one. That's outdated, and I took my blame for what's happened at 42 and 40, and what's happened at McGee's Crossroads, okay? But you also got to understand that there are virtual towns out there, that we control here. And so that's the hazards out there, and it's a mess out there. It is I had to go down to Sunday afternoon down to Highway 42 to, my daughter has a friend down there, and when I got off 40, I mean, they were backed up all the way to the Walmart exit on 40. And there's just no way to move that many people. It's just no way. It may be getting better. But I think we've learned from our mistakes and that. I surely have learned. But, we sort of looked at it in a different light, in that the market controls itself. And then people driving them U-Hauls, they saw that traffic when they got here. And
they still chose to buy.
They still chose to buy here. So, but I think the market should control what happens out there. If we got too many houses there, they're not going to sell. If we don't, But I also agree with the designation. As I look at it, why don't we fill this area up with development first before we go over here? That's what I say. Those areas where you can put high density, where you can put a subdivision. Let's fill that area up first before we move to somewhere else. That's my concern.
Well, and just on a positive comment based on what you were saying, I mean, I love some of the examples that you gave, like, for instance, the way you had McGee's Crossroads, where it kept the road moving, but you had that mixture of the commercial and the residential, and you could do high density in a place that's already set up for high density, it's already coming, but what you did is you did it better. You took it off of the main highway, you took it, you gave those amenities, you gave a reason, a good quality of life for why somebody would want to move into one of those communities. So that's what I say when we need to incentivize those many towns, those many cities that are happening, and I don't think incentivize is the right word, but encourage that type of growth to happen the way they had it organized, I felt was very well done. And that's the only thing I'm saying is we're going to have to make some changes with our ordinances and things like that to make those happen. And we just need to be on the same page.
As much as I believe it.
95% of the cropland acres are located on this side that produces crops and everything. You know, majority of all the farming is really done on the eastern side. And Commissioner Smith was, you know, I was raised on a tobacco farm, but that's, you know, you can't make a living. And once the buyout happened and whatever in the tobacco program, it went away. I mean, it just went away. And on some land you can't grow cotton, and you can't grow peanuts here. You know, they wouldn't let you one time. Now they let you, but nobody wants to grow peanuts. And he's right, because you know, I'm one of those generation children that sold the farm, because my brothers and sisters lived all over wherever, and I couldn't collect enough money to pay the rent, and so we sold it, and they haven't done anything with it since. That was 19 years ago, and it's still barren land out there. And eventually they may get to Brogdon in 50 more years, but...
Commissioner Stevens made a good point a while ago, but I don't, as much as I believe in freedom, encourage is not going to make it happen. It's got to be restricted.
Restricted how?
Zoning, that type of thing.
I'm all against. We have seen development happen in Cleveland, McGee's Crossroads, Wilson Mills, Archer's Lodge. All that growth has been just spiraling and just growing and just keeping moving out. But we've seen very little growth east of I-95 until just recently. And now we're talking about putting the brakes on at some point. But what we got to be careful of is 8 years ago, a starter home, a 1,350 square foot home for a young couple starting out in Johnston County, the median price was in the 180 range. Today it's over 300,000. And you keep on putting restrictions. Anybody that believes a developer is going to say, okay, I'll just take that on the cuff. They're going to put those costs, they're going to be passed on to the consumer. And if we keep raising the price, our young people are going to have to move out of the county to be able to find a starter home that they can afford. And we got to be careful. The more restrictions we put on, we try to attract industry to get the medium income in the county up. And when we do, the demographics they look at is how many people is in a given area, how many people in a 2-mile radius, how many people in a 5-mile radius. The demographics. People want the upscale restaurants, they want the upscale shopping. The only way you get those things is with growth. And growth has come to us, and we're sitting here trying to figure out a way to curtail it or control it, but stopping growth or putting a big, it's going to be, I don't have an easy answer, and I don't think any of us really got an answer that we know, hey, this is going to fix it. But we've got to be careful, because how many times have we seen governing boards, when they're trying to fix something, actually really mess it up worse? And I think I don't want to be a part to do something like that. If we're going to fix it, let's be methodical. Let's look at these people have done a fine job. I think they made a wonderful presentation, but we need to know that what we're doing is understandable for future boards, so that it doesn't become a tool to take someone's rights away. And that's my biggest concern.
In hindsight, would you have done anything different at 40 and 42?
Yes, I would, but that's in hindsight.
Okay.
You had a lot of government, you had county participation to make that happen. The joint ventures to run the water and sewer and build a pump station was all joint ventures, public-private. Without those, it would have never started like it did and just grew so fast.
That's what I'm getting at. It wouldn't have started like it did. So there was something to, if there had been something not to stimulate, but to actually unincentivize.
Well, and you have to look at also, there was not very much of that in Johnston County. That was a new thing, and if people were looking, we were a predominantly agricultural county.
Yeah,
Times change.
I want to go back 30 or 35 years ago. We got a new thing put in Johnston County called I-40, and went from Raleigh to Wilmington. And it was new, it was unique, and it crossed 42. And there were a couple of individuals who lived there who were pretty entrepreneurial. That was a one-time, what happened there was a one-time thing, and we keep talking about it and talking about it. That horse is out of the barn, and it's not going to be replicated. I think Meg and her team did a great job of talking about pods or nodes that have rural crossroads and neighborhood centers and things like that. And she talked a lot about cluster developments, which is what if we want to keep X number of people are going to come here. We can either put them in clusters and make good use of the land and keep our open space and agricultural land longer, or we can just let them all have 1 or 2 acres and a septic tank and just use all the land up. That to me, that's a big choice. And to think that by making them be on 1 or 2 acres, you're going to stop them from coming is a pipe dream. The one thing I would suggest, Meg, that y'all think about, you did not create a mixed use in your places. You did not create a mixed use, at least that I could tell, that talks about residential and non-residential working together. Now, if I miss that, I think that's important.
It's in there, the activity center description.
Well, when you on page 71, say, when you talk about 71 and 72, you talk about medium density residential, rural crossroads, and neighborhood centers, and mixed use centers. I might have missed it, okay?
Okay.
But I do think, I thought you did a good job of that, but I would love to either make it more understandable or whatever, that, you know, the guy who talked about neo-traditional, I forget it, Dewey or whatever his name is, which talks about both residential and non-residential together in the same development. I think that's a real key to making good use of our land.
You talk about a
Agreed.
PUD or something similar to a PUD is what you're talking about.
But with commercial in it.
Make it walkable. So if we can, we're going to kind of wrap this, if any other work our way this way, so we wrap this session up. So Commissioner, anything else?
The reason I talk about mixed-use residential, and again, I apologize, I only know what I do, so, but I know at Riverwood we have mixed-use residential. We have residential, we have commercial, and we have schools. And so what do we have? We have 2 schools that kids walk to. They don't ride a bus. We have shopping where people can walk to Food Line. We have pocket parks and trails that people can enjoy. And then we have downtown shopping to where they can eat and buy things. That's the type of, that keeps cars off the roads, lets kids walk to school, gives people in the neighborhood a chance to play without going off to a park somewhere. That's the benefit of residential and commercial together.
And the trade-off there is usually a smaller lot size or a smaller footprint.
You got to, if you're going to do the amenities, give for the school, what you do is people give up part of their yard to get amenities, pocket parks, trails, other amenities, and schools. And then they don't travel near as much.
That's right.
All right, Commissioner Stevens?
Okay.
You finished talking?
I did. No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
No, just one summary. because we're all on different pages, I'm sure. But if it's inevitable that we're going to turn into Wake County, they're going to come and they're going to absorb it all, I still say I'd rather have a person on a 2-acre lot than 4 people or 8 people on that 2-acre plot. That's all I'm saying. Less density. Push the density like the nodes they're talking about is great. But if we make it not so attractive to turn those farmlands into high density or medium density subdivisions, I contend that it can still work. And if they use up the land with spaced out housing, well, I'd rather have it used up that way than 4 or 5 per acre. That's all I'm saying. Less traffic, less density.
I think we need to understand this is not Los Angeles. We don't need, people do not want to mow grass and work in a flower bed. They want to go play golf, they want to go to the beach, they want to go to the movies. The big yards syndrome is gone. If we use up all the land for single-family dwellings and not use maximum production, I think the pubs with the mixed use, you go to, I was really impressed when Las Vegas had their own parks. In the outlying areas had their own parks, their own schools, their own gas station, their own grocery store, and that was part of their development ordinance. It had to be. You get a lot of developers that their idea is just build a street, put in a water line, and then let everybody else worry about everything else. But I've heard Mr. Smith say on many occasions the developers ought to step up and build a better quality development. And you'll see, yes, the cost will go up, but you'll see the use of the land be more balanced, and I think that we'll be able to maintain the rural character of a lot of our neighborhoods. Now, the biggest thing is most people, it's like you said, if it don't affect them, they're not really vocal about it. But if they see people that are already living in subdivisions, as a general rule, they'll complain about the traffic, but they're not going to complain about subdivisions or regulations. But people that have gone out and at their own peril have bought a section of an existing farm, an old home place, and bought 2 or 3 acres right in the middle of a humongous farm, they cannot expect to be protected by rules and regulations when they know that this growth is coming and we're growing at the rate we're growing. How do you tell a man he can't develop his property because someone chose to buy the home place and they don't want it to be disturbed? We don't have that right. I don't think we do. But that's all I got to say. I'm ready.
All right.
I'm right, Chairman. I'm ready to go too.
All right, yeah. So I wanted to point out that obviously this is not the first time you guys have heard the planning, zoning, and ordinance discussion. If I'm looking at printed page 9 in the thing, you have a nice little, I don't know what color green that is, I'll call it teal, on their plan versus zoning, which is a lot of discussion we've had tonight. And so we have the plan, the vision, and then we have the ordinances and zoning that goes with it to make that, I guess, an enforceable document. This is, to me, it's in pencil, shaded in pencil, and it'll be adjusted with time. And then we have the yet to come our ordinance update that will follow that. So I think that's important for us to, as we've had much discussion on what does this plan mean as far as the long-term impact. The other piece is, as I'm sitting here thinking that, and we've had discussion about the plan being implemented in the past and how it was implemented, but I think this, again, is a living document that we need to visit, every 5 years or 4 years or whatever the number we decide that is. But it also, in the implementation, I think some of the committee's thoughts was there's some review of the process that we're making and how we're implementing the plan. And I think that was part of what was on page 79 or whatever page that was in there. So there's a lot of, this is just the beginning. I mean, we're going to have a heck of a process to get this one adopted, but then we're still just in the beginning of the process with the zoning and ordinance changes that are coming after that.
Well,
I thought you were saying.
No, I changed my mind. If we don't do something like Commissioner Smith recommended, if we assign different parts to different people and get together, we're going to be here till 4th of July next year.
So you didn't let me get my third item on my list,
I'm
but
sorry.
but I'm getting there.
I
I'm getting there.
apologize.
I'm getting there.
I read your notes, you know.
Well, I'm gonna put it up on, I'm gonna put them on, if you
wanted it to be his idea.
If you can read those notes right there.
I want credit for it.
I thought Ted got the new glasses, so I didn't know you got that. If you can read that chicken scratch, you're doing good. The other concern I had, and I think Commissioner Bryce will mention affordable housing, is we've got, and Commissioner Smith has mentioned this a lot, we've got to have places for the folks working to live. And that is a big part of what this is. And we've got to make sure we're providing those opportunities. And I know it's mentioned later on in the plan. And then the final thing I want to talk about was committees. And if there's some suggestion, I don't know that any of us have the answer, but I agree that we're going to be here for a long time if we're going to go at this pace. So to develop some sort of committees, and I don't know if that's per section, if it's land use, infrastructure is obviously a big piece of it, but some suggestions in a relative short time frame so we can work through and decide who's going to do what, so that we can spend time digging into this, into the weeds, and bugging Braston and you guys and whoever else on the staff we need to bug, and make sure we understand, as Commissioner Smith, we understand what all of this means, because it is a complex document. So some input, and Braston, with you too, to make something that we can make some quick assignments so that we can advance this thing, not in a hurry, but just faster than one page every hour and a half.
That's your job. You're the chairman.
Yep. But I'd like to know, have some ideas, committee. I don't know I have all the right ideas, but I don't mind making the appointments as the chairman. I just want to make sure I have at least a clear path for us to move forward. So if we can get those in short term, I'll reach out to all the board and just make sure and discuss those committees, subgroups, whatever we want to call them. So,
And again, I want to say, I think y'all have done an excellent job presenting it to us. I know y'all put a lot of work into it, and please don't feel like that our comments are belittling what you've done there.
Not at all.
yeah, I was going to say that for the people who are watching and watching the sausage being made, I think that with this discussion we've had, that there's 7 of us sitting up here who are passionate about this and want to make sure we get it right, and are working hard and going to work hard to make sure we get the best land use plan that we can get for Johnston County for 2040. I think that we're all committed to doing that, and I think that's important for the public to know that we're all committed
Meg,
to doing
you
that.
and I had a great conversation. Enjoyed talking to you. I know this is a tough job, and I think you've done a great job. I think I really like a lot of things in there. I'm just trying to make sure we get the very best what we need.
I wouldn't put up with that.
Yeah. But they signed up for it a long time. You get into the hard part now.
Yeah, I wouldn't put up with it. See.
All right, with that, I want to move on to manager reports and comments. Actually, yeah, I'll move on.
Thank
Yeah.
y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, and actually, if we can go ahead, I'll include that to staff, manager, and reports, because I was going to call on Mr. Newton to come forward and give us an update on the firing range project that we had heard earlier.
Yes. So as stated by Mr. Parker earlier when he made his presentation, the staff we have cited the individual a second time, the property owner a second time. So our normal process is that we cite in accordance with our ordinance. We have the ability to cite it up to 3 times. So the first time is a $100 citation, second time is a $300 citation, and any subsequent beyond that is a $500 citation. Typically, when we get to that point, we then turn it over. We will turn it over to legal if we're not seeing any response to cease and desist, the use or to come into compliance in some manner, and that we have not had. We just have not seen that with the property owner there. We have had conversation with the property owner about this most recent incident on October, I believe it was October 1st. He apparently had leased out the property, and that was the company. We made him aware that it was still his property, it was his responsibility, and he was to be held accountable for it. So we'll continue to follow through with our process unless there is another direction this body would like us to go.
So they've had two,
Yes.
and the third one, before it goes to some legal.
That is, we can expedite that if we need to. However, I will say this. So we had the initial issue back in January, late January, early February. I think it was actually, we got first notification in late January, like January 30th. So we immediately investigated, did determine that there was an issue or non-compliance issue there. And we immediately sent a notice of violation, followed that up in March with a notice of violation and their first citation. So from that time period until October, our office has not been notified of any ongoing activity. These occurrences, I don't doubt the occurrences have taken place of sporadic use for discharging of weapons on that site. However, we've not been notified, nor there's no record of any calls to 911. So we've looked at that database and asked for that information, and the most recent one, or the last one we actually had, was October 1st. And that's been our instructions to the community, is when you hear these, because these tend to happen after hours or on a weekend. Obviously, if you call our office on a weekend, you may not get us. So chances are you're not going to get us. So we've instructed them to call 911 and have them dispatch a deputy to the site, and at least then we have a record. We're building record to ensure that we're doing everything we can do to bring this individual in compliance.
All right, and does that include, I think Mr. Parker mentioned that there were local law enforcement agencies out there as well. Does that include letting them know that that's not in compliance?
So what you have is, when you look at our discharge of firearms ordinance, which is that's not a land use ordinance, that's a police ordinance. So when you look at that, it talks about the discharge of firearms for private or public use, or is prohibited. So you can't have a public or a private, and private meaning I own it and I'm limiting use of that to those individuals for some type of commercial purpose. What we're talking about, discharge of firearms, really is meant for personal use. If I or a family member wants to go out in the backyard and we want to, do some range practice, and we can do that. Land use, different situation.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, have we told Four Oaks, the police department, that, hey, this is let your officers know that this place is not operating legally?
So we have not, out of our office. We have done that through the sheriff's office. Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we have at least communicated that. So they're not the ones out there in violation.
Creating a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I did have one other question, and unless anybody else has any other questions.
for this.
Could you give us a quick update on where the transportation plan update, where we are in that process for selection?
So yes, it has been released. We will be receiving that back in the first week of November, and we will report at that time. We'll report on the number of responses we receive.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Newton? All right. Rick, you're good? You've had enough tonight, too? All right, yeah. All right. I'll turn it over to the board for any reports and comments.
I do.
All right.
Early voting starts this week, and of course, we'll meet, I think it's November the 7th, is their November meeting? And that's the day before the election day. But a lot of people will vote early, and I just wanted to urge everybody to understand the school bond vote. We're not voting a referendum on the merits of the school system or the school board. We're deciding how to borrow the money to build needed schools, and that's the best way to borrow it, through this bond. So I urge everybody to vote yes on the school bond.
I do have one thing, and I apologize, it's in Commissioner Harris's district, I think, on Cornwallis Road. They're building a new fire station, and I was contacted regarding the sewer service there. It does not have a gravity sewer line. There's two force mains that cross that area. And from my understanding, there was some reason, I had a meeting planned, but unfortunately I had COVID and I couldn't attend the meeting. and they went ahead and had the meeting. But my understanding is that our engineering department has some objections to a personal pump station, a small pump station for that site. It's going to use the sewer equivalent to a 4-bedroom home, about 480 gallons a day maximum. And I just think that there ought to be some way we could accommodate that fire station that is for the benefit of, we think about how a fire department not only takes care of a given geographical area, it's for assistance to other fire departments if there's a major catastrophe, whatever. And for it to be such a asset to that community, I think we should really do everything we can to help them get that sewer service. If they don't get the sewer service in one of those force mains, they've got to buy additional land, which is going to run the cost up about $125,000. So I think it's substantial. And I don't know exactly what the objections were in our engineering department, but and I plan to talk with Chandra and find out. But I think we ought to support that and do everything we can to make sure that we haven't left any stones unturned to see if there's a way we can help them. That's on Cornwallis Road. Remember, we had there's a subdivision that we were going to talk about, perhaps increasing the ETJ area, and this is maybe something that's all going to happen together. But I just think that as a fire department, we should support them.
I agree, and it's going to be there in the next couple of years anyway. So have them incur that cost when it could. 3 years from now, we'll have it, and
yeah, that's what
they wouldn't have to spend it.
And then it's just wasted money, and then plus, then you've got that land that they purchased. You got to go take all that sewer stuff out to be able to build on it. But I had intended to talk to you, but I got COVID, so I didn't get a chance to make that conversation.
I understand.
All right, Commissioner Harris, I believe that brings it to you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I did want to ask the board's input on moving forward with a RFQ for the design work for the DSS building in anticipation of the property that we're looking at moving forward on. I know we haven't secured property yet, but I don't see why we can't go ahead and move forward with that request, because it'll take a couple of months to get something done and moving forward on that as well. So we're smart people. We can multitask. So I'm asking for the board's input on possibly instructing staff to move forward with an RFQ for the DSS building.
Architectural design, or just the site work?
We don't have a site.
Don't have a site yet, but it'd be both.
I mean,
it would be both.
We know what the site was going to be, so.
Well, if that all works out, then yes, but regardless, we can start the process of accepting the qualifications, because that's going to take a time as well. I mean, if we wanted to hire them tomorrow, we couldn't. I mean, there's a process.
Is that typically 2 months? So-ish?
I think all too often it takes us too long to get anything done, so I'd support it. Let's move forward.
All right.
I agree. Might as well have our eggs in our basket.
All right, everybody, all right.
You need a motion?
No, I think we got the direct, so I want to piggyback on that. So we also are talking about ordinance updates coming, and rather than wait to the end of this process and then start, I'd like to see the same thing as listen, now, we may get together and wait till we are more certain when this thing's going to end rather than get it out there, but at least direct staff to put the ordinance or the RFQ for the ordinance revision or land use code up revision to get that started and be sitting on ready for when we decide to pull trigger on that.
I think that's a great idea, but I would even say that if we can go, we may need some advice as we work through this, and if whoever's going to do the ordinance, if they could get in place.
That's a good point.
That they may be a resource to help us do a better job, because at the end of the day, a vision without a plan, without implementation, is nothing more than a dream. The LD is LD whatever, land development.
C. I think it's a C or
Why does that?
UDO? Okay, UDO.
Why does it have to be farmed out?
I don't think we have the staff to add that to our staff's plate is asking
keep
a lot of
more,
them.
add more
I
on
think I won't even get into that discussion about. Okay. And I'll use Kevin Leonard's looking at their feet because of all the fires they got going on rather than looking up. So I think a lot of our department heads got their head down fighting fires today rather than looking up and looking out. So, but I'm not opposed to to that, to moving this forward as fast as we can, because, I mean, we just, if we go end to end to end, it's gonna take a lot of time, so.
At least we got to go.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing that I just want to remind folks of, we still have our rules that we'll probably get to next month, one of the meetings next month, probably maybe the first meeting, we can go over the rules. And then also, in Brasson's already given the thing, on the transportation, so that's really the things that I had wanted to kind of remind folks of. And then if I don't have any other discussion or comments. Oh, sorry.
Go around the rest of the room.
You know, you forget about us, that's okay, I don't have anything.
Well, you interrupted me, that's why earlier, that's why I was gonna cut you off.
We don't punish them too over my misdoings.
You're special.
Oh, no.
All right. Anything else before I adjourn the meeting?
I'll just piggyback on what Commissioner Godwin said for the public with regards to the bond, just to remind people that it's not going to increase their taxes to support the bond. I know that's a misconception, a wide misconception, so just to reiterate that for those of you that are voting, to make sure that you inform them of that as well.
I would just add that is not the plan. We can't predict the future, but I would say that is definitely not the plan to do that, so.
I think the chances are greater to have to go up if we don't support
I
the
would
bond.
agree with that, yes, so. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Well, Well, give me some basis to go in closed session. But I want to go in closed session to talk about that project.
Which?
At 8:30. This might be one time I vote no.
Mr. Chairman, while they're talking, I will, everyone's commented about the bonds, and I do think it is important to remind the public that our financial models have included the debt service for the $177 million bond that's going to be on the ballot, and so that has been factored into our financial planning, and so it is not slated to require any type of tax relief.
All right, I make a motion we go into a closed session for attorney-client issues pursuant to whatever the statute is.
To the appropriate statute, is that?
31811A3.
Yeah.
That one?
That one.
All right. We have a motion. Do I hear a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of going into closed session for the reference statute, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. So we will go into